So welcome to this webinar, 21st Century Shifts in Workplace Learning, Your Role at the Leading Edge. And I've chosen this kind of theme, if you like, of these waves because I felt like sometimes in the ocean a wave is kind of an irresistible force that can kind of sweep you away or up or over or turn you upside down and dump you. And I think that we have a role on the leading edge and we need to learn to ride these waves of change. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Rolfe. I have a background in adult learning, career counselling and professional development. My consultancy has operated for the last 30 years. My latest book is Mentoring Mindset, Skills and Tools, and I'll be giving you a chance to win a copy later in the webinar. I've spoken on this topic in Canada, China, Singapore, the Philippines and USA. And I run these complimentary webinars each month, and they're attended from people in all parts of the world. The earlier today had people from Spain and Nigeria, the States, and today in this session I think we've got people from the States, Canada, as well as Australia and New Zealand. So welcome to everybody. And as I mentioned, I speak mainly from the corporate perspective, but I have worked with not-for-profit organisations, educational institutions, government agencies and community groups. So the content is applicable there also. We just need to kind of make some translations along the way, and I'll be looking for your input there. This webinar is about 21st century shifts in workplace learning and your role on the leading edge, because we're 17 years into the 21st century already. Goodness me. And these waves of change just keep coming, and they're huge and powerful. We have to ride them. We have to be at the leading edge if we're going to serve our constituents, be they our teams, students, employees, or even our own children. So as I talk about the number one issue that organisations are grappling with, the implications for managers and how to build organisational capability, you'll be able to see the relevance in your own area, and I'll be asking you to share your observations as we go along. For example, spoiler alert, the number one issue, according to the research that organisations worldwide are grappling with, is employee engagement. We're going to talk about that later on. But even though I'm talking about employee engagement, student engagement is equally an issue for educators. And if you've got kids, you need to know that their engagement at school or at work has an impact on their well-being as well as their success. So in this webinar, I'm going to be covering 3 reasons we need to make big shifts in how we engage employees. I'm going to talk about what managers will need to do differently at the business and the work group level, and also the key to identifying and developing the talent within our organisations. So fingers at the ready for typing, because here comes our competition. I'm hoping that you've heard this quote before from Archimedes, ancient philosopher and some might say scientist. I put a little fig leaf on him just in case nudity might offend anyone. And you may have heard this saying, give me a lever long enough. So the first person to complete that quote will win a copy of my book, Mentoring Mindset, Skills and Tools. So I'll give you a second or two. Let's have a look and see if those answers are coming through. I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to respond. Give me a lever long enough. Okay, Gihan is quick off the mark. Oh, Gihan's having a little joke with me. He's on the right track. Gihan says, so give me a lever long enough and a place to stand and I will break my lever. And a little smiley face. Thanks, Gihan. Terrific. Pauline's saying, and a place to stand. Now that's pretty close. Okay. Al is saying, and I'll move the earth. So very close. Okay, let's see. And Pauline's saying, I will move the world. Gyan, I think you're closest to it because, and the reason I'm starting with this quote, so congratulations, Gihan. The quote is, give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it. And he did talk about a place to stand as well. I saw that in the quotes as I was researching this. And I shall move the world. Now, I wanted to start out with this quote because, and I'm kind of using this as a metaphor. You see, I think learning is the lever. It's a lever we have to learn to use. I think that quote is probably where we, got the origin of talking about leverage. I'm using. I believe learning is the lever. But I think that one of the things we miss out on and one of the things we forget, and often when you see that quote, the bit that's left out, the bit in the middle, as any engineer will tell you, a lever won't work without a fulcrum. We need to actually have something to get leverage. Without a fulcrum, it's just a stick. So we're going to be talking about learning, but we're also going to be talking about what I believe to be the fulcrum that the lever of learning must lean upon in order to shift our world and make a real difference. So that I hope I will be able to explain better as we actually go through. So I believe that that learning in the workplace has never been more important, and here are some of the reasons. Here are some of the reasons why. Some research, and this is Australian research, but I don't really think the numbers would be all that significantly different in the US or Canada or elsewhere in the world. But I'm going to talk mostly from an Australian perspective. Young Australians start going into jobs today, 70% of those jobs will be lost to automation in the next 10 to 15 years. So there are young people leaving education into their first jobs, and 70% of those will be gone in the next 10 to 15 years. As well as that, employers are saying students are just not prepared for the workplace. And just this morning on Breakfast News TV, there was yet another report of employers saying, literacy rates aren't what we expect of our employees with our new employees coming in. And I don't know about you, but these days when you go into a shop or a cafe or something, I find that younger people are not able to, if you hand over cash, they find it difficult to actually make the correct change back to you unless the computer in the cash register actually tells them how much. They don't have that mathematics, arithmetic, basic arithmetic skills, and the literacy skills are frequently complained about too. In addition, 50% of students in education now are educated for dying jobs. Now, some of the disappearing jobs might surprise you. I mean, we're used to going into fill up our cars with petrol, and we do that ourselves these days at the pump. We're going to the supermarket, and increasingly we're forced to use those self-service checkouts. But you might be surprised to learn that, in fact, some of the jobs that are going to go are things like lawyers, doctors, public servants. In fact, Professor Hugh Durrant-White, in one of the reports over the weekend, was saying, he's from, I think, Sydney University, was saying all jobs that are primarily analysis are capable of automation. So the rise of the machines is with us. But I don't want this to be kind of thought of as being all doom and gloom, because of course there will be new jobs. Of course they will be replaced, just not as we know them. The point I really want to make here is that in the workplace, we're going to have a much bigger role in helping younger employees learn and adapt their knowledge and skills to these changing environments, so they too can ride these waves of change that are just going to continue, and they're going to be strong, and they're going to need to be able to ride those waves if they're going to thrive. In addition, the job market is way more competitive than it's ever been. Here in Australia, graduate unemployment is the highest it's been since the global financial crisis. So not only do we have a lot of highly educated young people looking for work, you've probably hired the best and brightest of them, and they're going to be hungry to move up as quickly as possible. In fact, graduates and junior staff have the highest level of turnover. Turnover in Australia went up to 16% this year from 13% last year and 11% the year before. And the largest part of that is young people. Now, that might sound contradictory to what I've just said. It's so competitive out there. But the thing is, those young graduates and those best and brightest young people, if they get into work and they get a year or two's experience under their belt, they know that they are more competitive out there in the workplace, and they're not going to stick around if they're not getting what they want and they need in the current workplace. And I'm going to talk about what people want and need from their workplace a little bit later on. So they will leave if they're not engaged and they're not satisfied. I don't know if you know this too, and I don't know if you're in the graduate recruitment market, but I do a lot of work here, and the return on investment on a graduate. Now, a lot of big organisations have really good graduate recruitment programs. They're out there recruiting the best and brightest, and they have good onboarding processes for new employees, and some of them have great graduate programs, give them a lot of support and education and so forth. So they're investing a lot in those people, and yet the return on that investment doesn't kick in until that graduate has been in place for 3 years. So if they leave an organisation less than 3 years after they started, that is a net loss on the bottom line. And of course, that loss applies whether or not you're a for-profit organisation. So it is a significant loss. So the other aspect of this competitive environment is, and Gihan talks about this a great deal, the changing workforce. We've got a global workforce these days. Companies, organisations are outsourcing a lot of work. Computerisation means a whole raft of mid-level jobs are being stripped out of organisations. They're actually organisations, they talk about hollowing out. So what we're going to have is younger, the mature and the older workers competing for fewer mid-level roles. That traditional idea of progressing through the ranks will be replaced by a need to kind of leap this gap, so leap up. And there will also be a polarisation between low-skilled jobs and high-skilled jobs. And for the first time in history, we're going to have 5 generations in the workplace. I'm a bit pleased about that because I'm a baby boomer and I love to see the fact that there are people even older than I am still working away and contributing in the workplace. So, we're all going to have to learn, unlearn and relearn to thrive as individuals and organisations. So I'm going to launch another poll. Quick question for you here. And here we go. Who do you think is responsible for workplace learning? And once again, you can choose more than one if you feel that's applicable. Who do you think has that responsibility? Just while you're voting, I'm just going to mute myself for a second. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Just taking care of myself because this flu's giving me a horrible time. As I said, I'm glad I'm not face to face with you and breathing germs on you. In fact, I wouldn't do that. So, okay, I think most of you have had a chance to have your say. Oh, a few more coming in. Okay, you can choose more than one. So, what do you think? Who's responsible for workplace learning? You can hedge your bets if you want to. If you want to make a comment, feel free to type in some feedback, comment, observations, experience. Okay, so I'm going to close this poll now. I think everyone who wanted to probably has had their thoughts. Let's share that. Okay, so 50% of people who responded said that, okay, this is the preserve of human resources, learning and development specialist. So there's a specialist role there. 50%, I'm pleased to see this, is saying that, you know what, managers of work groups or business units have a responsibility in this area. And everybody on the line today, I think we're a particularly select group here. The fact that you're here has an influence on this group, saying employees themselves. Now, some other people had another idea, so please type in for me why you choose that. What's your comment there? Let me put that away and look at what's coming in now in the comments as we look at who's responsible for workplace learning. If you've got a comment, feedback, observation, please share that. One of the beautiful things about these webinars is you don't just have to listen to me. You can contribute it and share with other people. By the way, if you want to make a comment or ask a question, and you want to do that anonymously, just type the letters ANON before your comment and question, then I can share it without naming you. So my own view is in alignment with what you're saying. I of course think that all three areas, the HR people, the managers and the employees themselves, all have responsibilities, but I think they're changing, and they're changing quite dramatically in the 21st century. Of course, and many of you are specialists in this HR and L&D area, and I think that you must be involved in the strategic planning of your organisations. I mean, this is such a big and important lever, if you like, that organisations need your specialist input as they plan strategy. I know that a lot of L&D and HR people are actually consultants to the business areas themselves. As well, and so it's not it's a varying role. So you've got this consulting, and you've also got the strategic role. I'm just looking at a comment coming in now from Margaret. Margaret says, I believe employees need to take responsibility for choosing their own goals and what they want to work on, but they need an employer manager that supports their development, i.e. providing them the time and the resources to do so. Yes, indeed, Margaret. That is the leading edge thinking that I'm talking about. I think you're going to see a lot more employees becoming proactive and actively choosing goals and managing their learning for themselves, especially younger ones. There are massive online courses, so you can enroll in a university course without ever setting foot in a university. You can enroll in that course somewhere around the other side of the world. You can do it at your own time. You don't necessarily have to do exams and those sorts of things, or you can, and you can get credit. So, and people have personal learning networks. The thing is, I see managers as the often overlooked critical person in workplace learning. See, here it is. I see managers as the fulcrum here. So learning might be the lever, but managers are the fulcrum that turns the lever from just being a stick into a lever that provides leverage for organisations and for individuals. And here's why. Now, I'm guessing that some of you are going to be quite familiar with this model of 70-20 10. It's been around for quite some time now, being utilised by organisations. So the idea is that most workplace learning, in fact around 70%, comes from experience. So doing day-to-day tasks, taking on new challenges or a project, practicing techniques. 20% comes from what they call exposure. This is social learning from and with your colleagues, peers, team collaboration, personal learning networks, leaders, mentors, and coaching. And just 10% of workplace learning is derived from formal education and training. Now, most people lump the manager in the 20% area because they must model behaviours. They need to be mentoring their staff and coaching their staff. But I actually see managers as the essential learning leaders in the 10 and the 70. Now, the 10%, so the off-sites, the formal training, the conferences, those sorts of things, are the most expensive element in this 70-20-10. So obviously you need to get the most leverage. You need to get the best return on investment in that 10% of formal education and training. And yet we know from years of research that less than 20% of what people actually learn at an offsite, at a conference, or even at a formal training, an in-house training course, less than 20% of that will be transferred and used in a meaningful way on the job unless people are mentored or coached. And the person best placed to mentor or coach staff on the job, guess who? Their manager, their direct supervisor, their leader. Managers need to be priming staff before they go off to any kind of formal learning, and they need to be following up when they come back, talking about the reason why they're going in the first place, talking about what's expected of them when they come back, talking about how to apply that when they come back, and then providing some support. That's a big role, and that is part of the manager's role to mentor and coach. I also see we could get a whole lot more leverage from on-the-job learning if managers took this coaching, mentoring role more on board in the 70%. So they're actually having conversations that get people to reflect on their on-the-job learning, draw the insight out of it, and then look at where they can apply that. Does that make sense to you? Feel free to give me some feedback here, comments. Okay. Oh, hi, Derek. Lovely. I was only thinking about you the other day. Welcome to the webinar. So glad you're here. And Derek's saying, in my experience, the best learning is found at the water cooler or the smoko table via the peers. Yes. So it's those, and it's found there because that's where conversations happen. That's where what I call mentoring in the moment happens. So it's a social conversation, it's a casual conversation, and yet somehow learning is derived from those conversations with peers or just with other people that you might come in contact in a social sort of way. So I see the manager role, as I said, I see the manager as the fulcrum here, and I see them having a lot of leverage, which is not being used as much as it could be at the moment, not just in the 20%, as some people would say, but in the 10 and the 70 as well. The second reason why managers must be leaders of learning is we are in the middle of a revolution when it comes to performance appraisal. I'll be interested in your comments, in your feedback. Is your organisation changing its approach to appraisal? Because an increasing number of large and respected global companies are ditching performance rating system because of what the research is turning up. Do you know that ratings-based performance management actually damages employee engagement? And how about this? The research says ratings don't even measure performance. They say more about the rater than the ratee. How about that? Have you seen that research? And it's particularly interesting because big firms spend millions of hours and probably millions of dollars a year talking to people about ratings for very little gain in actual performance. Now, obviously, the need to give feedback on performance will always be there, but the 20th century shift is to regular feedback. It's always escaped me how a once a year rating can possibly add value to people's performance. And instead, we're now seeing that people need regular feedback. And I'm talking weekly, if not monthly and weekly at least, or perhaps even daily, on the go conversations on the job with the managers. So that people, teams and individuals get in the moment feedback about whether they're on track or off track. And for some managers, this means developing a whole new skill set. I know people who just, hang their heads in shame and horror at having to do the annual performance review. They hate it. And so do employees for that matter. Not all of them, I guess, but quite a lot of them. Okay, please excuse me. I'm looking at what Derek's saying. Excuse me. Derek says, why wait 12 months to tell someone they are not cutting the mustard? Looney Tunes with a little smiley face. Yeah, I'm with you on that one, Derek. It's just ridiculous. When you know anything about learning, you know that the more immediate feedback is, the more likely it is to actually have an effect. Okay. So I'll just pause for any more comments or questions. How's this landing with you? Is this, I suspect for a lot of people online today, because we've self-selected into this area, this is probably not news, but it might be for some. How are your organisations actually addressing these issues? Okay. Al from the US is saying, how do people in Australia get sick when you have perfect weather there? Is it from the tourists who come from America and England in the winter? Oh, you're having a game with me, Al. But do you know what? There's an element of truth in what you're saying. I reckon I caught this on a plane. I was fortunate enough to go to China, Hong Kong, China, Cambodia and Vietnam just last month, December, January. And I've always felt that being locked up in an aeroplane with lots of other people who've been who knows where and recycled air in the air conditioning. And I've got a strong feeling I caught this on a plane because I heard someone coughing in the seat behind me on one of the flights. And I thought, oh, my goodness, please don't let me get sick. But I did. So forgive me. I'll do my best not to croak while I'm online. Excuse me. So any more questions or comments? I'll come back to those in a minute because I want to kind of move into this idea of employee engagement and how important it is. Okay, Derek is responding to you, Al. Derek says, looking after grandchildren who have just started back to school, they're germ machines. Yes, well, I haven't had that pleasure. I did see my grandchildren, but they were quite well while I was just getting sick. So I hope I didn't give something to them. So it works. What goes around comes around. Okay, so now these statistics are going to mainly relate to companies. So I'm going to ask you to make the translation here. So come back to me as I start talking about profit and sales and things like that. I want to know, what are the benchmarks? What are the performance indicator? What are the measures that your organisation would count in this area? So we know that employee engagement impacts on service quality and productivity. Well, that's the same whether you're a not-for-profit or a for-profit organisation. We know also that it relates to customer satisfaction. So if you're in education, your customer satisfaction, that might be your student retention, for example, or your student attracting high-quality students, that sort of thing. So you need to share with me what's the equivalent for you if these don't apply. Now, in a sales organisation, increased sales are in fact related to employee engagement, higher profit, and a greater shareholder return. So type in now for me, if you're not in a for-profit organisation, what's your equivalent measures? What does your organisation measure in terms of its success? How do you know your organisation is doing well or not? And what I'm going to suggest to you is that employee engagement will be linked to those indicators as well. So what we know about companies with engaged employees is they enjoy a 6% higher net profit and a 5 times greater shareholder return. Now, the other aspect that impacts on not-for-profits as much as for-profit organisations is that disengaged employees are 4 times more likely to leave. And you might say, well, good riddance to them. If they're disengaged, they're not a great asset. But there's still that cost, that productivity loss, replacement costs, and will you get a better employee anyway? There's a huge cost to disengagement. In fact, last year, and this is a US statistic, estimated $450 billion lost due to employee disengagement. That's billion with a B. Margaret's saying these are still relevant to not-for-profit as growth is something we strive to achieve. Thanks, Margaret. Glad to see you making the translation there for us. So let's take a look at engagement worldwide. Now, countries do differ in their engagement levels, and obviously so do different organisations, but this is a broad sweep. And incidentally, these figures haven't changed a whole lot in the last decade or so that we've been measuring them, which is why I'm banging on about this. We're not making the difference we could be. So worldwide, only about 30% of employees are engaged. Only 30%. 50% of employees worldwide disengaged. And get this is worse. 20% are actively disengaged. So they are actively working against you. Maybe not intentionally sabotaging you, but that's basically the outcome. What does that look like? Imagine this. So you've got 30% tugging and trying to go in the direction you want to go. You've got 50% that are either doing nothing or working against you moderately because they're not being as productive as they want. And you've got 20% pulling in the other direction. That's not healthy. That's not working for you. What do we even mean by employee engagement? Well, I'm not talking about happy employees, smiley sheets, because employee engagement is not the same as happiness, because employees can be happy and unproductive, can't they? So engaged has an impact on productivity. It's not even the same as satisfaction. So watch out for those employee satisfaction surveys. That's all well and good, but do they actually measure engagement, not simply satisfaction? Because satisfied employees don't necessarily make the extra effort, and they can be lured away by other employees who offer more satisfaction to them. So what is employee engagement? Well, according to Crawford, it's the emotional and intellectual commitment to the organisation. In other words, the degree to which you've captured the hearts and the minds of the employees. Engaged employees say positive things about their organisation. So think about the conversations that are occurring around the water cooler and outside as you're having a smoko, or inside in the canteens, the lunchrooms, the other places where employees gather, passing in the corridor. What do people say about your organisation? Are they saying positive things? Are they committed, heart and mind, to your organisation? Because that is what employee engagement sounds like. Do they stay? with the organisation. Now, I'm not talking about the people who, and in some organisations I know of, tragically, you've got people hanging out for a voluntary redundancy. I'm not talking about those people. I'm not talking about the people who see retirement on the horizon, their superannuation, their retirement benefits stacking up, so they think, oh, I'll just hang on for a couple more years until I hit retirement age and then I'm out of here, I'm not talking about that dead wood that's just hanging on the tree, waiting for the opportunity to just stay, not because they're contributing and not because they're enjoying what they're doing and they're committed, but just because they see some gain, and they can be the ones that are actively working against you. No, I'm talking about the ones who stay because they love what they do, they love where they do it, they feel like they're really contributing something and they're committed to it. And because these are the people who actually strive. Engaged employees are the ones that go above and beyond what is simply required in their job. They do the extra bit. So we know that employee engagement is linked to service, to quality. It's linked to customer loyalty as well as productivity. It's linked to staff retention. It's even linked to safety and merchandise shrinkage. Now, I'm not sure if we've got anyone from retail online today. However, in case you don't know what merchandise shrinkage is, I had a bit to do with people in security in retail. And merchandise shrinkage is merchandise that walks out the door without being paid for. In other words, stolen merchandise. And I was pretty shocked to find that a lot of theft, oh, please excuse me, a lot of theft actually is done by employees themselves. And I think that's a very sad thing. Clearly, you don't steal from people you're committed to. You do not steal from an organisation you're committed to, heart and mind. Please excuse me. Struggling a little bit here. But the point I'm trying to make here is employees that are engaged not only do not steal from you, they also, they're better with the customers, they're keeping an eye on the merchandise, they're looking after the business because they care about it, they're engaged. So my question to you now is, who or what do you think has the biggest impact on an individual's engagement? And you may know, you might guess, you may have picked up a big hint from what I've said already. I'm going to pause for a moment and ask you to comment and answer that question. Let me mute myself for just a second here. Okay, back with you and just looking to see responses. Okay, great. You probably knew this or maybe you guessed, but we've got Margaret saying managers with 3 exclamation marks. And Al is saying managers and mentors. Okay. Again, research, this time from the Gallup people. There are lots of variables, of course there are, that are going to impact on any individual's engagement. However, the biggest impact, 70% of the variance in employee engagement scores is down to the relationship with the manager. And I've heard it said very often, people don't leave jobs, they leave bosses. And the data certainly seem to bear that out. Clearly, in terms of improving employee engagement, HR activities like good recruitment processes, great onboarding that we're seeing a lot with organisations, Things like graduate programs, mentoring programs, and other initiatives are important. So we don't want to stop doing those. But they're not enough. As I said, um, over a decade of measuring employee engagement, and not a lot has changed despite the investment of millions of dollars. It's just not making a big enough difference. Um, Nothing compares to the interaction of managers and their direct report, the relationship, the communication, leaders and their teams at the coalface, so to speak. That's where people get switched on or turned off. I'll pause in a moment if you want to share some observations or comments. Um, the impact of the manager may not be a big surprise to you. It might be something that is quite obvious. But what's your organisation doing about it? Are they supporting managers? What are they doing? Is it being built into the job role, the position description of managers? You can start typing in some responses, some comments as we go. I'll pause in just a moment to take those comments. So the 3 reasons we need to make these big shifts in how we engage employees. Number 1, engagement, as we've seen, affects every organisational measure. Despite our best efforts, engagement remains very low worldwide, and the quality of the relationship with their manager has the biggest impact on employee engagement. So, comments? Okay, Al, coming to your comment. Okay, Al is saying 75% of any job is training your manager and understanding the unwritten rules. Yeah, the culture, the way the way we do things around here, the models, the behaviour that is accepted or unacceptable is demonstrated in the workplace. And yeah, I'd agree with you, Al. It's about all of those things. Okay. So any other comments or questions coming in? Let me move along now and talk some more about what managers leading business units and work groups will need to do differently. So we started out with that quote and the metaphor of leverage. I believe that managers are the fulcrum. We've already seen that employee engagement is largely down to them, and they play a critical role in learning. Performance management is still their responsibility, but we're moving from those old top-down tick box rating scale forms to actual conversations in real time aimed at development and progress, looking towards the future, not the past. Finally, and perhaps most excitingly, managers are best placed to discover potential of their people. And you know what? I reckon hidden talent is like gold. We simply don't know the half of what employees are capable of. In the 21st century, we need to become skilled at finding the talents and strengths that may not be obvious. We need to find hidden talent and develop it. If you do, people will be engaged. They'll love learning. They will perform better at work, and they'll fulfill their potential. Developing the individual builds the capability of the organisation. It makes us all more agile and resilient. In the 21st century, managers are also mentors. They're the key to finding hidden talent. Just like panning for gold, they need to be in the right place, have the right tools and skills, and it does take time. Okay, seeing some comments coming in. Al says, and if you don't succeed, you will leave the job. Yes. And Derek's saying, when your intrinsic values match the values of management that are regularly displayed, then one will be happy. But if diametric opposition occurs, then get on your bike. Yeah, and that's exactly what people are doing today. You know, and I'll talk about this in a moment when I talk about what people want and need from the workplace. But it is this increasing, I have my values and I want to work in a place aligned with my values. Someone who has the same sort of ideals as I do. Because we want that sense of belonging more and more these days. Okay. Al's got to leave, but we'll catch up on the recording. Thanks, Al. Great to have you on board today. So I believe that we've got to foster the idea of managers as mentors. I really feel like this fulcrum, this role of the manager, is as much about mentoring or coaching, if you want to call it that these days, as anything else. And with that idea, managers are able to find potential strengths and development, that they can focus them, and then they can help employees fulfill. So managers are really well positioned to find the potential strengths of their team members, of their subordinates, and then to understand that person's inspirations and aspirations. Motivation by carrot and stick went out with donkeys. And then it's about relating that person's potential strengths, their inspiration and aspirations, to the team and their personal mission. The manager's job is to focus on team goals. This is what unites any work group, having a common purpose, and then having clear performance indicators so that actions and outcomes can be agreed. And then, of course, accountability and feedback, these regular real-time conversations, so people know instantly whether they're on track or off track. And when we look at what people want from work in the 21st century, there's been this huge shift. People look for meaning in their work. As we've seen, massive changes mean workers must build resilience to change so that they can thrive. And this idea of work-life balance is kind of morphing into work-life integration in this 24/7 world. 20 years ago, probably pay, benefits, job security were high on the wish list for employees. But now their needs and wants are different. There are some variations between the generations, and individuals may prioritise. But I was reading a really great article by Anne Bard-Thompson based on her research, and she's identified a range of intangibles that are important to us baby boomers, the Gen Xers, and the millennials. So we've got this in common, even though we might look at it slightly differently. People are looking for trust. Don't let me down. You promised me this when I join an organisation. You make yourself out to be really attractive with all these opportunities. So don't let me down. I want a fair salary. Yes, money is important to me. I want a fair income for the work that I do. But keep your promises to me. And I want recognition. I want praise when I do a job well. So trust. There's kind of this contract between employee and employer, and people are looking for trust these days. People are also looking for enrichment. I want you to enhance my daily life. Yeah, I want this kind of mythical balance, if you like. I want my life to be good, not just my work. I don't want to have this either or stuff going on where I feel I've got to sacrifice one for the other. I want that acknowledgement for what I do, and I want development. I want personal enrichment. I want to grow and learn and develop. I expect responsibility. So I expect you as an organisation, as an employer, to act responsibly in the world. Behave fairly. Treat me fairly. Treat customers fairly. Be ethical and honest in your dealings. A sense of community is really important to people these days. We want to connect. Now, baby boomers might think of their work colleagues as teammates. So we're on the same team, we're mates, we're striving together. The Gen Xers might have a bit more of a tendency to want friendship amongst their co-workers and colleagues. And the younger people are looking for these cohort cohesive groups, supportive groups, and shared values. Please excuse me. So while our take on it might be different, all of us in the workplace are seeking that sense of community. And these days, contribution is really important. There's been this real shift. Make me bigger than I am. I have these ideals and these issues, these causes, if you like, that I want to contribute to. I want to do good in the world, and I want to be part of an organisation that supports me to do good in the world. Seeing a comment here from Margaret. Okay, Margaret's saying definitely relevant to not-for-profit. We aren't highly paid, so need other motivation to keep us satisfied at our workplace. And indeed, and I see this also in the public sector. You know, public servants mightn't be the best paid people in the world, jobs in the world, but some of them, not all of them, but some of them are amongst the most committed because they believe in what they are doing. And in a not-for-profit, I think that attracts people who do have this common sense of making a contribution in the world. So thank you, Margaret. But it does apply more and more. There's this crossover now into the corporate world that these things are important, perhaps intangible. So coming back to our managers and leaders, I think managers are the face of the organisation to their work group. They personify it. Just like customers, employees judge the whole organisation on the basis of the person in front of them. And for some managers, a transition from 20th to 21st century is going to be a giant leap. For others, maybe it's a small step because they know that as they develop a depth of understanding of people, as they develop the trust between them, as they develop a shared meaning and purpose, so they increase theirs and their team's effectiveness, engagement, and sustained success. And I'm going to finish up with a quote from Josh Burson, who's a thought leader in this whole HR space. And he says, it feels as though everything in the world of talent is changing, from the way we recruit and attract people, as well as how we manage and reward them, to the way we learn and how we curate and manage our entire work-life experience. So I'm interested in your response to what I've presented today, and maybe this quote sums it up. What are your thoughts? What's your reflection? What's your feedback on this topic? What do you think? I've actually touched on a whole lot of topics here today, and I'd be very interested for your feedback. And if you want to share, please type in, but at least for yourself. Make note, what are your key takeaways? As I said, I touched on a whole range of things here: learning, engagement, performance appraisals, a different role for managers. What's your key takeaway from all of this information? If you're speaking to someone after the webinar and they say, oh, you're on that webinar, what was that about? What was your key point that you take from that? And importantly also, are there actions you can take? Things maybe you want to investigate some more, things you want to do differently yourself or think about for yourself. And I'll come back and read some of these and also take these questions. I see we're just over time now, but I will stick around as long as there are questions or comments coming in. Before I read some of those and share some of those, just want to quickly let you know our next webinar coming up. Now, it might sound silly, March 3 or 4. I do know when it is, but I'm now running these webinars twice, and depending on where you are in the world, I'll be running them at the same time, but it might be the Thursday or where you are. We're 14 hours ahead of some places here in Australia. So look out for your invitation to the next one. I'll be looking much more at this 70-20-10, and do feel free to invite other people along to this webinar. And then end of March, beginning of April, I'll be looking again at this leadership skill, mentoring as an essential leadership skill. So do join us for that. I'll be sending you the link to the recording and the invitation to our next webinar. And by the way, if you're enjoying these webinars, do consider using webinars. I run these webinars for clients as well. They're very cost effective. They can be quite engaging and a time-saving way to shift to 21st century workplace learning. So email me if you'd like some more information about webinars tailored to your needs. So I'm going to have a look at the comments, how you're going to use this. Okay, so Pauline's saying, absolutely, the L&D role is changing to one of L&D curator, not a specialist anymore, as things are changing so quickly. Okay. Thanks, Gihan. Yeah, Gihan's saying, aligned to my thinking about talent as well, but much more in-depth. We should write a book together. You know what? I was only thinking about that this morning, Gihan. I'm struggling with my book writing, and I reckon that could really be a way to go. Let's talk about that some more. And for those of you on the line, Gihan Pereira is my mentor in a whole range of areas. Look him up on Google. If you're thinking about webinars yourself, he's written a book called Webinar Smarts, but that's only a tiny part of the wonderful things Gihan does. Gihan Pereira, Pereera. Look him up and have a look. Thanks, Gihan. Pauline is saying, we need to teach people how to learn. We sure do. And I'm going to talk about that a bit more in the 70-20-10 strategy. You know, it's all very well to talk about learning from experience, but do you know what? If you don't take time out to reflect on that experience and extract the insight, the learning from it, and then apply it, that's not learning. That's just experience. Okay, thanks, Pauline. Pauline's got to go, so thanks for joining us. I'll talk to you again soon, Gihan. Okay, Margaret is saying, thank you. This is all very relevant and validating. Key points, the importance of the manager's role, something I've always believed in, but great to have some more information to advocate. Margaret, one of the reasons I'm providing this information, and by the way, there are my articles in the newsletter. Some of those are available to download as a PDF, and they're all on the blog. I want to give you, for want of a better term, ammunition. I want to give you information you can take and share with others to back up your point of view, because you're saying you've always believed this. Okay, I'm another voice that's saying, sometimes it's hard to be a prophet in your own land, you know, that saying. So just having someone else say it can back you up and make your voice louder and stronger. So Margaret's saying 70-20-10 is very useful information, and I've always said that one-off professional development is useless unless there is follow-up. You know, I've been a trainer for 30 years, and it breaks my heart to know that no matter how good a training you deliver or education you deliver, so little of that is actually used in the workplace because there isn't that follow-up. So Margaret's saying there's got to be goal setting. Love the idea of using individual strengths in the workplace. Yeah, that's going to be a major theme of my work this year. Okay, Derek's saying key point. Love to, Derek. Derek's saying key point, employ Anne to address my management. Love to come up there and talk to your management. Let's talk about that. Margaret's saying I'm a big believer in reflective practice. Yeah, love that too. It's just so important. People don't understand that without reflection, really, we're not learning. So let's talk some more in our next webinar on the 70-20-10 and the reflective practice of learning. Okay, that brings us to an end of the webinar. I'll be sending you an invitation shortly to the next one and the link to the recording. I'll stick around as long as there are questions or comments coming in, but otherwise that brings us to the end of the webinar. So thank you very much for joining us I'm going to turn the recording off now. Thank you and goodbye.